All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to take the next hour or so to share with you one of our most loved resources on our EVERFI platform, and that's Ignition, Digital Wellness and Safety. My name is Mara Sloan. I'm the Kentucky and West Virginia Schools Manager, and I'm joined by my colleague, Jacob Preston. And we're just going to go ahead and dive right in and share a little bit about our platform with you, Ignition itself, and then show you how to get started and how you might use our resources in the future. So as we go through today, if you are having any issues with the audio or hearing us, you do have the option to call in to listen. So the phone number and access code is listed there. Also, as we go through, if you have any questions at all, whether it's about EVERFI in general, how to access the platform, any kind of question that you have that comes to mind, feel free to type that into the question box. We would love to chat with you. And then, of course, you can email us separately afterwards if you have specific questions that you want to take over email. And then last, we would love to see you on social media. We have several different accounts with EVERFI on Instagram and Twitter. So we'd love to have you follow us there. And then my personal Twitter handle is listed there. I'm trying to get more active and savvy on Twitter, so feel free to follow me and watch me stumble through social media. And I would love to catch up with you and see what you're doing as well. And then
I noticed your Twitter handle there is bolded. Is that because you wanted to draw everybody's attention to gain some more followers through all this?
You caught me. Anything for a follow. No. Wow, I just got called out. Anywho, also, if something happens and you have to leave us while we're doing this webinar, that is completely understandable in the time of working from home. There are lots of distractions. A recording will be emailed to you following the webinar, so that will be sent to your inbox. And so I mentioned a little bit earlier about what we'll be covering today, but first we will just introduce you to us and a little bit about EVERFI. We're going to dive into our resource Ignition today and share the online platform as well as offline resources that you can use with your students. We will show you how to get started on your own and then share some implementation tips that we've heard from the field to make your experience more meaningful. So again, my name is Mara Sloan. I'm the Kentucky and West Virginia Schools Manager. I've been with EVERFI for a year now this month, and I live in Lexington, Kentucky. I grew up just up the road in Georgetown, went to Georgetown College in UK for grad school. So it's been such a joy and a pleasure to work with Kentucky educators across the state and to work with our school communities to provide these resources and support. My email is listed there, so if you are a Kentucky or West Virginia educator and you'd like to reach out to me for any kind of support regarding EVERFI, you can find my email there. And then I'm going to let Jacob introduce himself.
Hey everyone, my name is Jacob Preston. I'm originally from Nashville, Tennessee. I taught in a small school district outside of Nashville for about 6 years, and I've been working in educational technology for the past 5 or 6. I currently live in Chattanooga, Tennessee with my wife, our 2 fur babies, and our 9-month-old daughter. So quarantine has been really fun for us with the full house, but we're making it so far. We're making it.
Yes, and I'm glad you said that. I should note, I also have a fur baby, Tony, who loves to get excited when the mailman comes. So if you hear anything, that's Tony. Again, just another one of those perks from working from home, right?
They are our co-presenters, if you hear them.
Exactly. All right, so we would love to hear where you all are from. Chat in, let us know. And again, you know, we'll reach out, Jacob or I, depending on where you're located, and make sure that we introduce ourselves to you all and get a conversation going. So as we're going through, feel free to chat in where you're from, tell us what you teach. We'd love to hear from you.
Okay, so I think it's you're kicking it over to me now, right, Mara?
That's right.
All right. So for those of you that haven't heard of EVERFI before, if you're seeing this webinar or you're going through it for the first time, what we do at EVERFI is we focus on whole child education. So all of our resources that we offer are all standards aligned, but they also focus on some more of the soft skills for students and incorporating those into your classroom. So we have things such as career readiness, social emotional learning, health and wellness, and then also financial literacy for elementary school all the way up to high school. All of our resources are, like I mentioned, standards aligned. They're all built for the students to be engaged with the device. So they're very gamified, they're self-assessed, they're self-paced for students. So when you look at it through the lens of remote learning, it's been great for a lot of teachers right now because they can assign a specific lesson to students during this time. But then also when assuming that eventually we're going to get back to normalcy in our world, tons of teachers across the country are using our resources in their classroom on an everyday basis. So the way that we're able to provide these for you is because of these great sponsors. So all of our resources are no cost to you. You'll probably hear Mara and I mention that several times throughout the presentation. They're never going to cost you anything. They're never going to cost your students anything. You're never going to get spam emails or anything like that. And the other great thing is we have unlimited student licenses. So if you're watching this in the fall, this recording in the fall, and hopefully we're out of this quarantine and you know, back into having our students in the classroom, there's not a free trial thing going on. Like you can use this with as many people in your building or as many students in your building as you would like. In addition to the unlimited student license, we also have professional development and training opportunities. So Mara and I, we work with teachers in districts across our states. Mara, obviously Kentucky and West Virginia, myself, Tennessee, and I believe she left off Alabama in the in my introduction. So I wanted to give myself a little credit that I cover 2 states as well. So it's not just Mara. We're very, very equal in this. And again, you'll notice some of these logos here on the right side of your screen, but these are just some fantastic people that have really used the philanthropic arm of their organization to reinvest back into their community. So you see all these different sports leagues, different banks, organizations, just people that are passionate about education and they want your students to have access to these resources. Specifically today, we're going to talk about Ignition, but I'd be remiss if I didn't show you all of our resources that we have, mainly because like we mentioned, and I said this about a minute ago, but all of our resources are no cost to you. So if you have a family member that teaches, maybe a spouse, you know, a friend from college that lives across the country, they have access to these resources as well. They can use them with their students, and you can even use stuff that's not necessarily on grade level for you with your students or with your kids at home if you would like. So in addition to all those resources that we have, we're constantly pushing out new resources. We're constantly adding things. So just be on the lookout for that, especially if you're watching this webinar on record. I'm sure by the time the fall gets here, there'll be a couple extra little nuggets in there that we didn't have on this presentation. So in addition to that, like I mentioned, real-time reporting. So students have a pre-assessment and post-assessment with every lesson inside of every resource that we offer. In addition to that, we offer lesson plans and discussion questions. So you're going to see that here in a second. I know in Tennessee and Alabama, some teachers are part of their contract is they're being asked to provide 3 week of online learning contingency plans for the fall. So we're going to show you a great way to access these ready-made lessons and ready-made lesson plans so that you're not having to reinvent the wheel and you can go ahead and start your summer. I know for me, once summer hit, last thing I'd want to do was lesson plan. I would rather just, you know, print these off, hand these to my principal and be like, I'm out. What about you, Mara? Are you kind of the same way?
Well, I do love a good lesson plan. I'm big on Excel sheets and Google Docs and planning. But yeah, just to know that there's already something ready made and it's quality, and it's, it's scripted, it's standard aligned, that's huge. That's, a lot that's taken off your plate. And, maybe it doesn't fit every single thing that you planned on teaching, but it helps relieve a little bit of what's on your plate. I think that helps.
Yeah, and it's got to alleviate some of the pain in knowing that people that love lesson planning and love creating and love planning and detail oriented, those are the people on our team that are really focusing in and diving into these lessons. And so it is very scripted and very high level for you. And even though we are free or no cost to you, we really pride ourselves on delivering high level instruction, having a very user friendly platform. All right, Mara. Well, I'm going to kick it back over to you. And if you're going based on our agenda, because like you said, you're a planner. So of course there's an agenda step by step. According to the agenda, we're going to start talking about our online and offline resources, but specifically for this one, we're going to talk about Ignition.
That's right. So, Jacob and I have both heard from our respective states and territories that we work with that this is a resource of EVERFI's that is popular. It's used in so many different content areas and different capacities with different age groups. And so we wanted to, share this webinar and an opportunity to really dive into the course itself, because as with everything, there are so many resources out there, so many different organizations, especially right now during remote learning, that are pushing out resources, making things at home friendly, making things free for right now. So there's just so much saturation out there with different resources that you have at your fingertips. And it's not always easy to navigate those and to know what's quality, what's not, what are you going to have to pay for eventually, what is covered in each of the resources. And so we wanted to take this dedicated time to dive into the resource for you, because we know that you might not have time to do this on your own, or dedicate time to that. And so again, this resource will always be free for you now and after remote learning. And I think this resource, where it is so versatile, you're going to find so many uses for it in your classroom and even at home with your own family. So now I want to dive in to the specifics of this resource. So Ignition Digital Wellness and Safety. We actually have on our platform right now, so if you are viewing this webinar anytime between now and this summer, you will still see Ignition Classic on your teacher dashboard. So this resource had been around for several years, but we just recently relaunched Ignition. And the reason being is that with a resource focused on digital wellness and safety, we needed to make sure that the content was up to date, relevant, and engaging for students. We know, as users of citizens of a digital world, that things are constantly changing and evolving. There are new apps every day that our young people are exploring, and it's hard to keep up. And so we wanted to give this a facelift and make it more relevant to students. So we, are keeping their attention and engaging them. And so there's a lot more reference to social media and screen time and offline time within this new version of Ignition. And so we've heard a lot of great feedback from users of our Ignition Classic that have switched over to the new version. And after this summer, the new version of Ignition will be the only one that is available. So we are sunsetting that Classic version. But just some logistics of the resource itself. We recommend that it's used in your middle schools or in 9th grade. That is just a recommendation. We understand that this content might be relevant for a 5th grader or a 10th grader, and we encourage you to make that decision of what's appropriate for your students, because you know them way better than we do. And if this is something that you want them to access, by all means, feel free to request that from us if you don't already see this as an option on your course catalog. And I'll share a little bit more about what that means here in a little bit, or Jacob may. But I just wanted to point that out now. I know in Kentucky, we do see it used a lot in 8th and 9th grade, especially in 9th grade as students are going into high school and, they're transitioning to a school that may be one-to-one, and teachers will assign Ignition as a digital driver's license. And so they'll require the students to work through the resource and pass with a passing grade before they're able to take home their Chromebooks or tablets, whatever it may be. So that's just one way that we see it used in Kentucky. And I know Jacob and I will share some more implementation ideas here in a little bit.
Yeah, and I was going to jump in real quick here, Mara. So part of the reason why we recommend 6th through 9th grade is, if you notice on the left side of your screen there, and this holds true with all of our resources, but specifically we try and gear them towards the standards alignment and the Lexile level that it fits. So you'll see, with CASEL standards alignment, ISTE, that's where kind of this 6th to 9th grade, standard really hit. This is where it really hits those standards. But if you deliver this to your students, so say you want to deliver it to 12th grade, 11th grade, 10th grade students, this will make more sense here in a second, but they're not going to see that this is a 6th to 9th grade recommended resource. That's not going to be something that pops up on their screen. So like Mara mentioned, feel free to use this how you see fit. We consider ourselves the EVERFI experts, but we consider you the experts in your classroom. So we want to lean on you for that, and lean on you for knowing your students, and we just want to provide you the best resources possible. And this will make more sense here in a second, but maybe just one specific module makes the most sense for you to use, and you are welcome to do that. You don't have to use the entire resource. You don't have to use all the lessons. Maybe you just want to use 1 or 2 of them with your students, because that covers what you're doing, and we're completely okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the beauty of EVERFI in general, is that you have the ability to tailor our resources to what you need. So with Ignition, there are 6 total lessons, and each take about 30 minutes. So that is that design is intentional. We wanted to create resources that are digestible for students. They're not sitting at a computer for hours on end. Maybe you only have 30 minutes at the end of a class period or at the beginning of a class period to allow students to use technology. And so we had that in mind as we designed this resource as well as others. So just at a high level, I do want to kind of shout out some of the course topics and objectives that are covered as students work through the different modules. So there is, of course, instruction around how to be safe, how to protect your privacy in a digital world, your screen time versus offline time that I mentioned earlier, how to evaluate different sources online and the content that they're providing, managing your presence in an online community and how to make connections and network, and then digital rights and restrictions. So we're going to dive into each of the lessons here, just a few minutes on each to kind of break that down a little further so you have an idea again of what's covered. And maybe some of these are more relevant to your instruction than others. So this will give you a good opportunity to hear what's covered in each of the lessons. So we'll first start with this lesson 1, connections and community, and you'll see there on the screen the different key topics here. But what students are doing is, as they work through the scenarios, there are different key topics that are covered, such as cyberbullying, social comparison, emotional contagion, and the best way to handle different situations that they might encounter. When I'm thinking about different ways to implement this resource, I feel like this first lesson is it reminds me so much of the first couple weeks back to school when you are taking time to set expectations and norms for your classroom and your school community so that you're contributing to positive school culture. And I actually got to thinking this morning about what's that going to look like if we start school in a remote setting and we don't have that opportunity to engage physically in a classroom and set those norms and procedures and practice those. I think that this lesson would be a really good way of kind of setting the tone, because if you think about, you know, online learning, remote learning, we're going to be interacting with students in an online community. So whether that's your, you know, your Google Classroom or whatever platform it is that your school district uses, you know, our students are going to have the opportunity to interact with each other and interact with you. And so it's going to be on us and on teachers and educators to facilitate, you know, setting those norms and expectations in a new way. And I think that this could be a really great lesson to share with them, to kind of set the tone early so that you all are successful as you navigate remote learning. And so, and I also love, of course, this focus on social emotional health for students. I remember being in middle school, and it's tough as it is to navigate the drama. I can't even imagine what that's like now that everything that you do can be recorded and posted and commented on. And so I think it's so important that we are supporting our students and helping them learn how to navigate those situations, because as I'll share in a little further in another one of our lessons is that, you know, what they do, yeah, it may be deleted, but somebody may have seen it, somebody may have screenshot it, and so, you know, that stuff lives online forever. And I think just helping students navigate any situation in a healthy way online is going to be key. So that's lesson one. They're helping their friend Alyssa respond to different comments on her post and helping her handle challenging situations that come her way. So it's very lifelike, very much something that our students may encounter or may have already encountered in their digital life. Here's some more visuals of lesson one. And then with the second lesson, we are shifting into safety and privacy mode. So your key topics are listed there: keeping information private online, the digital footprint that I mentioned earlier, and then how to seek help from an adult if you are in over your head there. We have done some research around this topic. And what we found is that at age 12, students begin self-reporting high-risk internet behavior. So they're aware of, the dangers that are out there and the risks that are involved. And so it's important that if we are exposing our students and our children to everything that can be out there, that we are equipping them with the skills and the knowledge that they need to be safe. And so through this module, they're learning all about safety and privacy online. We want them to know that, as they are a generation growing up with technology, that everything that they put out there stays out there. And, I feel like, Jacob, you and I, we're the generation where this kind of became a topic of discussion when we were like late in high school, but definitely in college as, we are looking for jobs and thinking about our careers. And, we started hearing from adults that, interviewers will look at your online profile. They're going to check in on you and see, what it is that you've been up to, what pictures are you posting, just to, get a feel for you. And so I think even more now than ever, students are on devices at a very early age, and they're interacting with different people and different communities online. And so that digital footprint is even bigger and even more impactful than it was when we were their age. And so I think it's important that with this module, we're exposing them to those realities that they are going to have to face. So with this,
Absolutely. You know, if you look at, like, sorry to interrupt you there, Mara, but like, you know, for me as a sports fan, you know, I love college football and all college sports, and you look at some of the pictures and tweets and things like that that come out about some of these athletes that are, you know, turning pro or, you know, starting to come into the forefront of society. And it's things that they did when they were 16, 17 years old. And it might not even align with their worldview or you know, how they see the world. It was just a mistake that is now out there forever on the internet. And so like these are things that our students need to learn about at an early age to know that, you know, hey, this can come back and bite you in the long run.
yeah, for sure. And I think it's important to realize that, you know, kids can pick up a device and know just like that how to, you know, navigate apps and how to use it, but that does not necessarily mean that they are savvy and they understand all of the risks. And so I think we need to, you know, provide instruction around that where we can. So with this specific module, students are helping their friend Aiden, you know, explore different things that he likes to do on the internet, whether that's, you know, getting on social media, buying video games, exploring different apps, and then they help him create a social media profile in a safe way. So learning which privacy settings to choose, location settings, all of those things that our students, you know, maybe they've already created a profile, but this could be a good wake up call for them as they are working through this lesson. And now module 3, this is my favorite lesson within this resource because I think it is very timely, but also relevant to learners of all ages. And so myself included, Jacob and I have talked about this on previous webinars about how, you know, during the day when we are exclusively working from home, we are plugged into our computers from 8 till 5, sometimes earlier, sometimes later. And then, you know, especially when things were heavily locked down and, you know, we're confined to our homes, we found ourselves spending even more time on our phones after work hours. And it was getting to be to the point where at the end of the day, I was just absolutely exhausted. And I thought, what have I even been doing for the past, you know, 2 or 3 hours? What am I even looking at? And so, you know, I think that thankfully I'm an adult and I'm aware and able to regulate that. But with our students and our children growing up in an age of technology, it's not always black and white for them, and they may not have the skills that they need to regulate their time on a device. And so especially right now where we're asking students to use devices for learning, but then they might be using it for other reasons as well, it's important that we are helping them find that healthy balance because we know based on research that there are risks to having too much screen time and being dependent on a device. And so this resource really dives into that. This was one of the new lessons that we added to Ignition. So I'm excited that we are able to share this with students. And I think too, it's important to realize that a lot of teenagers do realize that, you know, they should disconnect and that's, you know, a priority, but they might not know how to or when they should and when they shouldn't. So I think, again, it's all about helping them find that healthy balance so that they're able to be digitally well. So in this particular module, it's a game-like situation where as the learner, you're helping Sophia navigate her day and decide, you know, what is a distraction, what is not, what is necessary as she's, you know, using her device throughout the day. So the learner in this lesson has to help Sophia like strike the right balance between needs and wants when it comes to, you know, navigating a digital world. All right.
Yeah,
and
for sure. And the crazy thing is, you know, thinking about that, Mara, you and I were talking about this yesterday, but even for me as a first-time parent, I look at my 9-month-old daughter, and the more that my wife and I are engaged with our cell phone, the more interested she is by it. And so, just even like reflecting on that and thinking about the world that she's going to live in. I know for me, when I was growing up and I was, in sixth, seventh, eighth grade, it was a little easier to manage screen time because if you got on the internet, that meant no one could be on the phone. And so, our kids live in a different world, or our students live in a different world now. So this is something that's super important for them. Not even in quarantine, not even in remote learning, not even in this season of life. It's something that they're going to have to deal with moving forward. All right. So a little bit about the next lesson. So technology and data. So what's really interesting about this is, our students that are coming up now are digital natives, right? They've never lived in a world without social media. They've never lived in a world without the internet and things like that. But while they are digital natives, most of them admit that they don't really know how their actions reflect online and how that makes an impact into later. So in many cases, middle schoolers, high schoolers, they don't know what to look out for as far as digital threats. They don't know what to look out for as far as phishing scams and those types of things. And people are getting, unfortunately, just so savvy with these phishing scams and malware things. I know I got a text message a couple weeks ago that said, hey, you came into contact with someone that had COVID, click this link to figure out next steps. And it was just a spam text message. And so all this whole lesson is about identifying and avoiding digital threats, steps to keep personal information private online, steps to protect, digital data from compromise. So the way that we kind of do this in a gamified environment is that the students are actually they get to follow this student Malachi, and so Malachi is on a game with his friends, and so as he's working through this game, he's figuring out, okay, what is a strong password I need to set so that my friends can't hack into the game and, take over my character, or even like how that translates into other parts of his life. And it also goes into, Malachi learns about, a few different malware and phishing scams about free online games and links that he's getting, pushed to try and join to add, experience points to this character, so on and so forth. And so it's really about evaluating that aspect for students so that they can, really be safe online. Again, thinking about if our students are stuck in remote learning at the beginning of next year, this is fantastic for them, when you're talking about emails, you're talking about things that they're going to be on, even for remote learning, just so that they can evaluate that and they can make sure that they're not putting anything on their device, whether it's owned by the district or it's their own personal one from their parents or, whatever. It just helps them stay safe in this scenario. The next lesson that I want to talk about is digital rights and literacy. So I think this one's really one of, Mara talked about screen time versus offline time being her favorite. I think this one is probably one of the most relevant to this season of life that we're in right now, mainly because of the explosion of TikTok while in quarantine. So, students learn about, they go through, and I'm going to get into this in a second when I talk about the actual flow of the lesson, but they create their own video. And then the video goes viral and they learn all about they violated the privacy agreement based on the site and all that. But as far as the key topics, students go through and they learn about understanding responsibilities as, the digital creator and the participant. So they identify digital rights and restrictions and differentiating between created and curated content. So, not only does it do this in the gamified way of, a video, but it also kind of reflects back into the next lesson that we're going to talk about, but just identifying sources and things like that. So when you look at the actual lesson flow, like I mentioned, the students develop a video and it goes viral. And they discover that they have to actually take that video down because it violated the site's policy. And so students not only learn about that, through the digital rights and privacy, but they also learn about what intellectual property is, copyright, public domain for use, all those types of things. Again, when you talk about what's being put online, oftentimes if you Google different names or different friends, different people, you can see all their, social media websites, places where they've lived, all of that's public domain, and there's different companies that are capitalizing on that right now, and they're profiting on that. And so it just kind of teaches students really how to be safe in that environment and how to really manage that in a healthy way. And then the last lesson that we're going to talk about, lesson 6, is just evaluating content. And again, kind of in the season of life that we're in, so important right now. You think about all of the, I hate this term, but all the quote unquote fake news that's out there. And, you talk about, I know Facebook, I feel like Facebook dates us right now. Our students don't really have Facebook. Is that right, Mara? They're more on like, Twitter and Instagram and that kind of stuff. So, but anyways, you talk about all the links that are being put out there and stuff that people are sharing, whether it is around elections or COVID-19 or, just different data. And it talks about how students can search online, how they can evaluate content for accuracy and perspective, and differentiating news from native ads. Those are super important as well. What is an opinion piece? What is something that's actual news? What is being reported? How do you disseminate that information? How do you sift through it to find the actual narrative, to find the truth inside of there? So in this lesson, the game version of it is that they get to help the student, Jorge, go through and pick out a bunch of different news stories and view different sources with friends. So you talk about, I mentioned this being important in our COVID world, but you also talk about this from like a actual learning perspective. So when students are creating, papers, or they're doing writing prompts and they're evaluating sources, it teaches them all about, okay, like what's an opinion-based website, like Wikipedia. So, Wikipedia can be changed by anybody at any point in time. So it really helps them identify and evaluate that to where they're more, I would say, digital literate, and they're more prepared to make responsible choices online. The thing that we wanted to talk about now would be how we've seen Ignition being used. So again, thinking about all 6 lessons, there's a couple different things that really come to mind for me here in Tennessee and Alabama. Digital literacy is very important in the season of life that we're in, but we also want to just really focus on the fact that this is a season of life. And we're going to eventually resume, whatever that new normal looks like, and our students are going to eventually come back in the classroom. And all of these principles are still going to be important, and it's constantly evolving. So specific to this season of life, I know that some districts that I work with, they've used this as just an instructional module for digital literacy and digital citizenship as far as Ignition as a whole. They've extended remote learning because of, COVID-19 into the summer. So students are being allowed to keep their devices into the summer. And so part of that, the district feels a legal responsibility and just a personal responsibility to make sure students are staying safe online with their devices, because oftentimes in districts, them having their devices at home isn't the norm, right? They either bring them in at the end of the school year, or they check them back like in at the end of the day. So I see a lot of districts in Tennessee and Alabama that are really taking ownership of this and saying like, hey, this is a great way to cover all of these topics with students being safe online. Just right to their device, they can work through everything. It's all gamified and it's engaging for them. And again, this doesn't just cap at ninth grade. It extends all the way to 12th grade for a lot of districts that I work with. Mara mentioned this in Kentucky, but we have another district in Tennessee that they are one-to-one starting in ninth grade. They don't have that access in middle school yet, but starting in ninth grade, students have to take Ignition before they can ever take their Chromebook home. And so like that was important to them, for students to fully understand almost like the digital agreement that they're getting into with the district and that device before they were ever allowed to access that away from a controlled environment inside of a school. What about you, Mara? How have you seen this used in Kentucky?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier the digital driver's license usage of Ignition, and that is a huge reason why Ignition is the most used resource, EVERFI resource in Kentucky. I was just thinking too, in some conversations that I've had with educators and districts, I have seen Ignition used during advisory periods. So specifically in high schools where they have, 15 or 30 minutes every single day of an advisory period that is sometimes structured. I think per the district would prefer it to be structured, but oftentimes can end up just, being a study hall or tutor time or whatever it ends up being. And I've seen Ignition used in that capacity. So because of its touches on social emotional learning, and there's been a big push for that in districts here in Kentucky and in West Virginia. They've been utilizing Ignition during those periods of the day. I was also just thinking too, as a former student myself, I can remember when we're assigned big research papers, and even when I was writing at Capstone for my master's degree, how we are required to use so many sources, and then we were only allowed to use like one or two online sources. The rest had to be like actual books from a library, which I'm sure has evolved a little bit now because there are so many sources online that you can access, and a lot of them are good in quality. But, like the lesson shares, there are a lot of resources out there that are not quality, that are not fact-based, they have bias or whatever that is. And so I'm thinking that Ignition would be, especially that module, would be even helpful in like an English class or a social studies class, where you're requiring students to do big research based projects. So that if it's not being done already, which I'm certain it is, I feel like that would be a good, unique use of that particular lesson.
Oh, I'm gonna tee this one up for you, Mara. But what about students and teachers that don't have access to devices or internet? We understand that that's not equitable throughout our country.
Yeah, so we were aware of this before COVID, and now especially during. Teachers have reached out to us requesting on or offline resources that they can share with students that don't have access to technology at home. And we already, on our teacher dashboard that you'll see a screenshot of on the left, we have uploaded all of our lesson plans, discussion guides, course outlines, all of the resources that you might need to implement the digital platform, but also if you're wanting to do instruction off of the digital platform, and whether that's in person or remotely, you have different resources there at your fingertips that you can play around with and pick and choose what you use to use offline. And then on the right, you'll see that is a screenshot of one of our STEM career exploration student activities. But we've been working really hard the past several months now, creating even more student activities that cover the content that is included in the digital resources for those students that might not have reliable or any access to technology. So on the left, that is located on your teacher dashboard. If you're interested in looking into some of the Ignition student activities, I'd be happy to share those with you as well as Jacob, so we can get those into your hands as you're planning for the future. I know that when remote learning first started, a lot of districts were exclusively doing NTI packets. And so this, if we continue on that route in the fall, and that's a requirement by your administration, I'd be happy to work with you to figure out which resources need to go home with students, which resources you will use, so that way you are ready to go come fall. And so in the spirit of that, we also created some 2-week remote learning plans, because we offer so many different resources, as Jacob shared earlier, in many different content areas. And so we did these by grade level bands. And so you'll see on the screen there, that's grades 4 through 5. And we pulled out the resources that fit best with those grade levels, and then broke down a 2-week learning playlist, if you will, of different lessons and the time that it takes students to complete those, and then the learning objectives that they are accomplishing as they work through the different lessons. I think this is extremely helpful when you're thinking about pacing and how much to assign to students. I feel like that was definitely a learning curve that we had to go through when remote learning first began. Is, you want to give students as much as you can, because you want them to have access to content and instruction. But it took some time for us to work out the kinks and figure out what was the right balance of how much to actually send home and require of students. And so we created this to hopefully take a little bit off your plate and help with that planning. We also have standards alignment for our resources. You'll see on your teacher dashboard that you have access to the national standards alignment on there, but we do have state-specific standard alignment as well. So if you're looking for that in Kentucky or West Virginia, you'll reach out to me for that. And then Tennessee and Alabama, you will reach out to Jacob for that.
All right, so I'm going to kind of breeze through this. Now, the expectation, if you're on this webinar or if you're watching it, isn't that you are able to do this in real time. So feel free to reach out to Mara or myself if you have any questions regarding this process. But I just kind of wanted to show you quickly just an overview of what it looks like from your perspective if you are brand new to EVERFI, if you want to get logged in for the first time. So what you would do is, and we're going to provide this document that you see on the right side of your screen there, but I'm going to walk you through those steps. So if you are a traditional EVERFI user, you would go to everfi.com/teacher, you'd select your state, type in your school, and then you would create a username and strong password, mind you, because this is Ignition, so we want to make sure it's a strong password, and then select one of the resources that you'd like to add. You can totally add more later, but this is just kind of our jumping off point. One little caveat that I'll throw in here, and we haven't provided the Tennessee district. So if you are a Clever district and your district has a Clever agreement with EVERFI, again, if you're watching this, this is no additional cost to your district. This is just a service that we provide for single sign-on. These are the districts here in Kentucky. I can let you know if you are watching this from Tennessee and you want access to the single sign-on, because this list is evolving. If you do have Clever inside your district and you want, but you don't see an EVERFI tile on there, feel free to reach out. We can start that process. We can talk to you. We can talk to whoever at the district level and get this going pretty quickly. It's not a hard process. But we wanted to throw that up there because if you are a Clever district, you would log in through your portal and your students are already there. You already have an account, so you don't really have to do any of the other steps that we talk about as far as getting students started. So on your teacher dashboard, once you jump in, this is what it's going to look like. So the first thing that we would want you to do is click that blue Add a Course button. So what that's going to do is that's going to launch open our course catalog. Again, you have access to all of these. Some of them might say request. If you need to request something, just feel free to do so. We'll add it to your dashboard. Mara is pretty on top of it. I like to say her turnaround time is probably 10 minutes, Mara, because you hate those to stay in your inbox. Yeah. We as a team, we pride ourselves on staying on top of this. So If you request a course, basically what that's saying is that, if you're at a high school and you want access to a middle school resource, we're just trying to lock it in just so teachers don't accidentally deliver a resource or some lessons to students that aren't on grade level, but we do recognize the fact that students might be advanced or they might be delayed. So we will definitely grant you access to those at any point in time. Once you click that green add button, that course is going to be added to your dashboard. So we kind of showed you what Ignition looks like from the student perspective. If you add other resources and you want to see those individual lessons, you can click the View Course button, and it will go ahead and launch into Student View. You're going to have a little bit of administrative rights here, so that way you can click through some videos, you can do things that students can't do, but on the whole, it does give you access to the Student View, and you can work through our lessons just as the student would. So you can, if you feel the need to vet them on your own, or you just want to see what the students are doing, you can totally do that. Back on your teacher dashboard, we've mentioned this a few times, in that resources tab right there, or button, that's where all of our offline resources are going to live. That's also where you're going to find curriculum guides, the course outlines, these super detailed lesson plans that we mentioned, just in case you need to want to print those out, or you can just export them as a PDF and send those to your principal. If you need to provide lesson plans, if you're thinking about using this as a contingency plan for the fall, all that's going to be accessed right there. Again, even if we go back and you have sub plans that you need to leave, you can totally leave these for a sub as well. So keeping going on. So if you want to view your student progress, again, we mentioned this from the very beginning, all of our lessons have pre-assessments and post-assessments baked into them. What you do is you click on that reports tab up at the top. That's going to navigate you to all of the courses that you have. Once you select one of the courses, you'll see the student's real-time grade. So these are all the post-assessment scores. If you want to click view for each individual student, it'll launch that in, and you can see the knowledge gain there from the pre-assessment to post-assessment. Over in that column on the far right, you're going to see certified. In order for a student to pass each module, or in order for a student to be certified, they need to pass each module with a score of 70 or higher. The nice thing about all of our lessons is that we allow students to go back and take assessments at any point in time. So what you're going to see here is the highest grade. So it just depends upon you, depends upon your students. Like if you want to average out all of those assessment grades, you can for the post assessments. If you want to just take the highest grade, totally up to you. If you want to limit it to 3, they're going to show up in a linear fashion when you click view, but the highest grade is always going to show up. And then once they're certified, they'll actually get a certificate, and they'll be able to print that out. You can send that to them. So again, if you're talking about Ignition and you're developing a digital portfolio, or some sort of like digital driver's license to have access to devices, this is something they can totally do and show proof of having that. From the student perspective, this is what it's going to look like on their dashboard. So if, again, if you're extending learning into the summer and you want parents to check progress, you totally can. One thing I want to draw your attention to, so on this specific student's dashboard, you'll see 306 African American History, which is a high school level course, Alcohol EDU, high school, Keys to Your Future, high school, and then Compassion Project. So Compassion Project is our elementary school social emotional learning resource. What you'll notice is that doesn't say anything about the grade level there. So it doesn't say anything about the grade band. So if you do request something that is, an elementary school or middle school, and you want to deliver it to your high school students, they're not gonna know. It's not gonna show them that on their dashboard. So they're not gonna have access to that information. So I know we're kind of butting up the time here. So I'm gonna kick it over to Mara, and she's gonna just go quickly through some implementation tips, some best practices, and then we'll wrap it up and be done for this morning.
Yeah, thank you, Jacob. Sounds good. So I just want to quickly share some implementation tips that we're seeing used during remote learning, but then also during traditional learning. And one is an increased usage of our resources through Google Classroom. So if you are delivering content in through this platform or another, you can link EVERFI. You can write very explicit instructions for students so they know how to get started on their own. As you create classes on your teacher dashboard for your students to be a part of, it will give you a code, and students will use that code when they register for their accounts and get added to your class. Now, if you're in a Clever district, You won't be using codes. It will use your rostering information to create classes, but regardless, this gives you a place to instruct students on how to get started from afar. You can link any of our quick start guides or any of our platform links, anything that they might need to get started on their own. Some other uses of platforms like Google Classroom is using our offline resources like our discussion guides with the questions, and then pulling some of those questions on to like a discussion board and letting students respond back and forth to each other in that capacity. So I think, thinking about online communities and interacting with others online, I think that this would be a cool way to facilitate discussion in a remote learning scenario. And then another popular use of EVERFI in general and specifically Ignition is through a choice board. So I've seen teachers use this in regular class time where they have students that finish a task early, and so they're allowed to go get their Chromebook or tablet and pick and choose from different resources that the teacher has made available for them to use to stay engaged while they're waiting for their peers to finish as well. And then using our lessons to either, to introduce a concept, so maybe it's the first time they're hearing about a particular content area or topic, to reinforce those. So if you're thinking about, RTI or just wanting to go over again a certain concept to kind of really reinforce it, or as a capstone, you have the ability to use our resources in any of those capacities. So I love that they are flexible. It doesn't matter, how you deliver them. It's totally up to you, and you have the ability to customize that for your classroom. Some other things we're seeing right now is sharing EVERFI on social media. So on the left there, teachers sharing out how students can get onto the platform. On the right, you'll see some teachers that are praising students for their hard work on our platform and reminding them of upcoming assignments. So I just encourage you all to get creative and share out on social media what your students and families need to see, because they're definitely engaging there, and I think it's just another good way to reach them during a time of remote learning. And then these are our quick start guides for students. I'm happy to provide these to you in follow-up, just again to make registration for them as easy as possible. And if we are hopefully back in the classroom this fall, they can utilize these during that time as well to make that process of registering as easy as possible. And just a few more tips and ideas before we let you go. If you're thinking already about 2020, 2021, which I'm sure you are, feel free to reach out to us for help in finding, where the best place for you is going to be to use these different resources, specifically Ignition. We're happy to help kind of, write that into your plans or your curriculum and find alignment for you there. Think about technology, so whether or not your students have access to technology, if you're in school, if you have to reserve a laptop cart, just thinking proactively about any of those obstacles that might be in your way as you plan to implement EVERFI. And then finally, thinking about sign-in for students. So if students are using Clever, it's single sign-on, which is really nice and convenient. But for those that are registering the traditional way, I do encourage you to have students use a username and password that they are already using day to day in school, so that way it's not something that they're easy to forget or lose, and then that way you won't have to spend time resetting usernames and passwords over and over and over again. So just one of those tips that I've seen from my many interactions with teachers and students. Definitely make sure that they're using something familiar that they won't forget. And then before we let you guys go, I did want to highlight the EVERFI General Scholarship. So this is available to any student grades K through 12 who has completed and earned certification in one of our EVERFI resources. So for Ignition as well, if students complete the resource and have become certified, they're eligible for this scholarship. It's a $1,000 529 college savings scholarship, and there is still time to apply. The deadline is June 1st this year. All right, and we do want to leave you with some next steps. If you're looking for more information about our resources, feel free to visit us online and get started with your account there in the middle. Again, I'll follow up with your quick start guides that you'll need to do that. And then share out with us on social media what you're doing, how you're using EVERFI. We would love to interact with you there and provide support. So thank you all so much for taking time this morning to join us. We're so happy you all were here. If you have any questions at all, reach out to Jacob or myself, and we're happy to support y'all. Thank you.
See y'all.